Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing part 2 of our support tier list video. So, in part 1, I spent a lot longer than I thought I was going to spend, surprise, surprise, but I was talking a lot about the different meta changes that are going to be happening with support, I think, and a lot of that relates to things that were going on the patch notes, other roles, and stuff like that. So, be sure to go through, check that out if you want the overview of like what's going on. I'll have it timestamped for you. The TLDR is that I think enchanters are going to be a lot stronger and tank supports are going to be a lot weaker. So if you want to know why and how I explain that, check that out. I'll have a link in the description if you want to go look at that. And then also look at my patch notes video. I have that broken up into 2 parts as well. So part 1, I go over the dragon changes and the changes to the jungle. And then in part 2, I go over the item changes and the rune changes. So be sure to check out all of that content. I'm going to be releasing all of that today for you. So I'm trying to just, give you as much as I possibly can because there's a ton going on in the preseason. It's pretty exciting. I think it's going to shake up the meta quite a bit. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So as always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe. It does help out a ton. Come check out the stream around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night. Super friendly community, very chill. I try to be as conversational, as interactive as possible with the chat. So it's a good time. Come by, tell us about the new builds you've discovered, some new ideas you might have. If you have questions for me, I'm happy to field them. We do have a lot of other very knowledgeable, I know there are numerous diamond people that come in and hang out on the stream as well. So they can give you some different perspectives also. So come by, check it out. It's a good time. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. So I think the number 1 support here is going to be Soraka. And I've been playing Soraka a lot more over the last few weeks, and I've come to appreciate a lot more about her. And I know, I'm not sure if Edmund still stops in every now and then. And he was always begging me to play Soraka all the time. Soraka in general is a very popular champion on this channel that people like to see because just a lot of other people don't play her very often, and she is kind of the quintessential support character, right? She's the big healer, she's like friendly, benevolent, all this stuff. People really like Soraka, so I'm glad that I'm able to play her in this meta a bit more. But aside from that, aside from the lore, aside from giving the people what they want, at least a lot of people to an extent, I think that she is actually very, very strong right now for several reasons. I thought she was already pretty good near the end of the season, and that's saying something. I mean, she already has the 5th highest win rate in a meta that is dominated by hard engaged supports. Keep that in mind, that she already had a high win rate when the pick rates on champions, Thresh, Nautilus, Leona, Blitzcrank, and then Pike's up there too. All of these are thought to be hard counters to Soraka. So, in a meta where it's dominated by hard counters to her, she still had a really high win rate. So that right there should tell you something about what's going on. But there are several changes in the preseason that I talked about in the last video that will apply here and why she's so good. So, number 1, to keep in mind historically is that they changed her. They buffed her several times this season, and a lot of this kind of went under the radar. I talked about it a little bit. But I didn't quite put all of that together as much as I did in the past. So the big changes were around like 9.9 and 9.10, and I know that seems like it was a lifetime ago, but basically what they did with that change, just to catch you up to speed if you haven't thought about Soraka in a while, is they nerfed her E, so that's the quick silence, which is basically just point click, did a lot of damage, and that's where you got the combat Soraka of the preseason that was popular, where people would just get a lot of AP, you take Airy, Scorch, just everything aggressive you could take, and then just spam E on the enemy and just poke them out of lane. They nerfed that a lot, but what they did in exchange for that is they changed Star Call to where basically it does less damage too. So they nerfed the damage on the E by a ton. They just pretty much gutted the E. They knocked off 50 damage off of max rank E. So they pretty much gutted maxing E. They took away a decent amount of damage on her Q. Where's the self-healing cooldown? Base damage reduced. So they took off 30 damage if you max E, only 20 if you get 3 points in it. But what they did was they gave her a ton of extra healing, a ton of extra AP scaling on that healing that goes to both you and your ally, and they gave a bonus movement speed to you and your ally whenever you heal them. So it just kind of solidified her more as a healer than it did as sort of an early game bully. So she can still bully, but it doesn't do as much damage as it once did before. Okay? And then they buffed her on 9-10 to give her even more movement speed and they made it decay significantly less rapidly. Okay, so decay is a really annoying stat. I've mentioned that in the past. I don't know exactly what that means, but she does keep the speed for longer. Like, we don't know, is it like it decays, you know, 20% per second or what? We have no clue. But it does feel like it's a lot, like you get to keep the speed for longer. They increase the damage on Star Call around 915. And then this was a huge one. Is that her Q, and this was on 917, her R was not giving her the bonus 40% healing when she was below the threshold. So she was basically losing 40% healing on her self R. So this gave her a lot of extra survivability once this came through. So those are changes that a lot of people just haven't really tried out as much, and I really underappreciated myself until until I tried her out again recently. So what is it about Soraka that makes her really strong in this meta? Well, the biggest thing is, like, her healing is insane. Like, it's so much, especially with Star Call. Once you start getting into the math, and typically what you'll want to do is you'll go 3 points in Q, Star Call in the laning phase, and then you'll max out Astral Infusion last. So first of all, it's really cheap. So the Fairy Charm changes, or the Frostfang changes where you lose the mana regen. Not as big of a deal because your harassment only costs 40 versus, you know, things like Nami's harassment is going to cost a lot more, like 70 plus. So it's very cheap. It's on a fairly low cooldown, you know, 8 seconds. It's got nice range, 800 range. Now, it can be tricky to land this on people, but that's out of a lot of auto attack range, and that still gives you plenty of maneuverability a lot of times to get away from stuff. So not a huge range, but like a pretty comfortable range. If you land it, it's a pretty good value. I mean, 75 for 40 mana. If you get 3 points in this, it's only 50 mana to get 145 damage. And this is where it starts to really start to go off the rails if you pay attention to what this actually means. It's 100 heal on yourself, and if you heal somebody, it also gives them a 100 heal. And it also gives 25% bonus movement speed for 5 seconds. Now, that does fall off a little bit, so you don't get the full 25, but it's a lot of movement speed for a pretty good chunk of time for both you and your ally. So if we add this up now, it's 145 damage plus 200 healing and 25% bonus movement speed for 2 for at least a little bit of time, maybe averaging over 2 seconds, 10% bonus movement speed. So that is a lot. That's a lot of extra healing. All that's for 50 mana. So basically 150 damage and 200 healing for 50 mana if you land it, in addition to the movement speed. That's crazy. That's so good. And then if you start and it's a 50% AP ratio. So that applies to you, and that also applies when you heal someone else. So that's basically a 1.0 AP ratio. So if you have like 100 AP, you know, in the early game, if you get like, I guess it's rare, but I mean, if you get like something like an Athene's, you get to 100 AP early, then you're going to get the full 100 value out of this. So that's a 1.0 AP ratio, 150 damage, and 200 healing on a spell that costs 50 mana. That's good. Rumor has it that's pretty good. That's also on a 6-second cooldown. Now, you do have to land it, so that is tricky, but it's really good. Also, you can wave clear with this. So, you know, 150 damage to the backline minions is really nice. You know, you just hit those backline minions with your Q, and then Caitlyn, you know, does her Q and just rips right through them, or Sivir. And Caitlyn and Sivir are going to be very strong on this patch, I think. It's really good. So that's handy. And then you start to go to her Astral Infusion, which looks kind of unassuming. It's like, oh, it just heals for 200, until you look at the cooldown. 2 seconds. 2-second cooldown on this with a 0.6 ratio. So if you hit somebody with Star Call, and remember, if you heal them at any point during this 5-second rejuvenation, it gives them the full 5 seconds of rejuvenation. I'm like 99% sure that it does that. So if you hit them with rejuvenation, and then you get 2 of these heals off, then all of a sudden you're getting a 2.0 AP ratio on this. You're healing yourself, which is going to counteract the damage that you're taking here. You're healing yourself for, you know, a grand total of 400 healing, in addition to a 2.0 AP ratio off of that heal. Each heal is doing that. So it just gets really crazy. You know, if you think about Janna's shield, you know, if you land one sort of one slow on somebody or whatever, 1 CC, you know, Janna's shield's going to be about 8-second cooldown. Lulu's shield, 10-second cooldown. A lot of, even, you know, someone like Senna, after you land a few auto attacks in between things, you know, it's probably going to be like an 8-second cooldown. This is 2 seconds. You can spam this. So if you land that Q, you just go to town just spamming heals on people, and it's just so much healing. So in those 8 seconds, you know, you could get off 4 of these heals, which would be 800 healing with a 2.4 ratio. And then if you have Star Call ticking the entire time, every time you heal, it's going to be for an additional, you know, like almost 200. Now, some of that does apply over time, so reapplying it isn't the same kind of benefit, yada, yada, yada. But it's still, the numbers just get wacky as you see it. So if you just hit 1 Q and you've got this maxed out, then it's a 600 heal with a 2.6 ratio for a total of like 100 mana with both of these skills combined. So that's just an insane amount of healing. Even if they have Morellonomicon, it's like, okay, you reduce my healing a little bit. You know, instead of doing whatever it was, you know, 200 plus, it's just a hell of a lot. Instead of doing, you know, like, I don't know, 1,500 healing over like 5 seconds, now I'm doing 800 healing instead, you know? So Morellonomicon is good against her, and Executioners is good, but she's still going to just truck through with a lot of health. And if they don't get it, if they don't get any healing reduction, I mean, you're just going to massacre everybody. So that's really good. It's on a low cooldown. She pretty much forces stalemates in lanes a lot of the time, especially if the hard engaged champ can't get any hooks. It's just almost impossible to push her out of lane because she's going to land a Q eventually on you, and all it takes is 1 or 2 Qs, and then she heals her partner, and boom, all of a sudden you're losing the lane. Because if you were both, if everyone in the lane is at 50% health, she lands that Q, throws a heal up, all of a sudden she and her laner are going to be at like 75% health. And then they can start bullying, pushing you under tower, and then she's going to land more star calls on you because you're going to have to choose if you want to hit the minion or eat the star call. And it just gets pretty rough. So she is going to fit in really well with the push-poke meta. You know, all of the nerfs to the hard engaged champs that I mentioned before are going to be a huge buff for her. Having the extra gold is a huge buff for her because, as you can imagine, with this much base healing and like crazy ratios, like every time you land a Q, you're basically getting a 2.6 AP ratio. AP is really good on her. Plus healing and shielding is extremely good on her. So she's going to scale better than almost anyone in the game with things like Redemption, things like Mikhail's, Ardent Censor, Athene's, even Shirley's Reverie is going to be okay on her. So she's going to love that extra 500 gold that you get off the Spell Thief. And she can proc it so easily too, because you can take trades, you can take a couple of hits and just heal up with your Star Call that's on a fairly low cooldown. So she's going to be really good. Now, she doesn't have a lot of CC. She does have Equinox, and this can be really nice because it is point click. You can't really miss it, and that silence is relevant. It can stop people from flashing. You can put it on someone who's trying to teleport in, like an enemy who's teleporting in, to make sure they're going to get rooted. You can stop channeling abilities. It has decent range on it, so it's got some utility to it. Is it as strong as a lot of the other CC out there? Probably not, but it's okay. It's okay for a kind of a point click. And then Wish. Now, this is one of the strongest things about her, and it's really underappreciated. Like, this does take a little bit of skill to use properly because you have to understand what's going on around the map. You have to be watching health bars, and you have to be, like, understanding the situation because you don't want to waste it if someone's going to die. But if you're a really good Soraka, if you're able to not only, like, watch the mini-map and watch what's going on in your screen, but interpret, like, how the fight's potentially going based on that mini-map, based on the health bars, then you can get assists across the map. You can influence the map. So it's a global. It's basically like a reverse Karthus. You know, and Karthus is really good in the jungle because he has that global. So you can roam without roaming. So yes, Soraka can't really roam comfortably, or it's hard because if she gets caught out, she's probably going to die. But she can roam without ever leaving her lane. She just presses R and boom, there's a roam. You know, she can turn around fights like that. So, you know, that is really handy. And there's so much, like, cooldown reduction. Now you've got the Windrake giving cooldown reduction on ults, potentially, which she's going to love it because she has one of the most powerful, high-scaling ults in the game. You get 40% or 50% extra healing here. So the empowered healing, you know, you got to remember, this heals everybody, right? So, like, level 11, you know, the baseline healing on this is, like, 400% AP and, like, base, like, 2,000 healing or something like that. It's just nutty. It's so much healing. In team fights especially, so it's just a really, really powerful ult, and you can still go things like Ulti Hunter, She can get Ionian boots pretty comfortably because she doesn't have to get mobility boots because she roams with her ult. So she's just got a lot of stuff going for her, and obviously this is going to be super strong on tanks like we talked about last video. So I just think she's the biggest abuser right now of the plus healing and shielding items. I think that she's already really strong in a meta that's heavily geared to beat her with all of the hard engaged supports and all the assassins. She was still the 5th highest win rate support. So I think she's just going to take off. I think she's going to be really, really strong. I would be shocked if she doesn't get to like top 3 support in the first couple of patches. I think she's going to start drawing bans. I think that Senna and Soraka will become the most popular support bans, you know, over the next month or so. It's going to take people a little while to figure it out. Because Soraka is very maligned. Like, a lot of people don't like her because she can't make plays. She's not strong. You know, it's the same thing with Janna. People just don't understand why these champions are strong. And to that argument as well, people might be saying, well, you know, you can't play Soraka if you have a bunch of, like, dumb teammates running around. You know, you have to be able to engage. You have to be able to hard carry. This is hard carrying. You know, being able to crank out, like, 1,000 healing, like, whatever this number was, 2,000 base healing with one button, and also being able to use Astral Infusion to crank out multiple thousands of healing in like 5 seconds is just, that is carrying, because remember, this is anti-damage. In fact, it's even better than damage most of the time because it works with resistances. So if someone has, you know, you're healing somebody that has 100 armor, as we talked about in the last video, you heal them for 1,000, it's going to take 2,000 damage to counteract that 1,000 healing that you just put on him. So whenever at the end of the game it says, oh, Soraka healed for like 30,000, you got to keep in mind that it's going to take, you know, I don't even know what the average resistances in the game will be, but, you know, it's probably going to be at least 50,000 damage to heal that. And if you look at charts like that, you know, you'll see that that's going to, like, just completely erase, like, 2 champions on the enemy team. Like, the 2 lowest damage dealers are just gone. Sometimes 3 champions. So, you know, just imagine on the chart, right? If you saw a support that did, like, 50,000 damage in a game, you'd be like, holy crap, that's hard carrying. And someone like Zyra or Brand can do that some games. But people don't think the same thing when they see healing. They're not like, holy crap, Soraka, like, gave people 50,000 effective health. But it's the same thing. It's 2 sides of the same coin. It's the yin and the yang there, right? It's the healing counteracts the damage. If people can't do enough damage to kill you, you're hard carrying because you are anti-damage. You know, they can't win the game if they can't kill anybody on your team. So it's a different kind of thing. It's not what a lot of people think about. But that's what makes her strong is like, your allies, it's still really hard for them to screw that up. You know, because it's just raw stats. Like, you know, if it's Nautilus, yes, you can make a game-winning play, right? You can land a hook, you can go in, you can do all this stuff, you can be proactive and make plays and force action, and you can win games like that. But there are so many games, too, where you're Nautilus, and I know y'all know what I'm talking about, where you go in and your team just, like, watches you die. Like, you ping it a bunch, you have vision, you know it's really good to go in and pick this person off. You go in and your team just doesn't follow you up. Maybe they're scared, maybe they're lagging, maybe they're high, who knows, whatever it is. But that's just one of the real risks of playing something like Leona or Nautilus, because you can't kill them by yourself anyways as a support. You have to have people follow up on you. So Soraka doesn't have to do that. She doesn't go in out of, she doesn't have to force anything. She just says, okay, it's on y'all, you know, enemy team. You have to engage. You have to kill us, because if you don't, we're just going to outscale you. I'm just going to heal through everything that you do. If you let me get to 3 items, you're never going to kill anybody. Good luck. You know, that's pretty much what she says. And so it's on them. Then they have to try to force these risky plays, or they're just going to lose late game because you have a 3-item Mundo and a 3-item Soraka, and you guys can basically just 2v5 the enemy team. So that's how she carries. She carries with consistency. It's just stats. It's raw power. The enemy team, you know, or your team can't mess that up. Like, the only way, like, they can mess that up is usual ways that people throw games, right? Like, if someone on your team runs in, like, you know, 1v5 on the enemy team, yeah, like, you're not going to be able to heal through that and they're going to die. But that's the same thing with Nautilus. Like, if you try to go in, if that Master Yi tries to go in 1v5 and you hook and you try to go in and help, you're going to die anyways, right? And he's still going to lose. So that's how Soraka carries. That's how Janna carries. That's how enchanters work, is they just have better scaling, better stats, and they just win through raw power. I mean, just think about it like this. It's something like people could say, you know, a champion that's just raw damage that doesn't have much utility. Something like a Kiana or an Akali. Like someone saying, oh, those champions are bad because they don't have playmaking skills, right? They don't have a lot of CC, you know, they don't have a lot of macro pressure, you know, so they're bad. It's like, not really. They do a hell of a lot of damage. If they get ahead, they can blow people up. It's the same thing with Soraka. It's like, yeah, she shouldn't have a lot of CC, she shouldn't have a lot of roam pressure. I guess with her ult, she kind of does have roam pressure, but it's just the raw stats. Like, instead of blowing people up, you're just burst healing and making sure they don't get blown up. So I think that's one of the big misconceptions about Soraka and a lot of the enchanters, is that you can't carry with them because people don't understand what carrying means. They think it's damage. Carrying means that you win the game. Like, that's what carrying means. You're doing stuff that's contributing to an outsized influence on the game. That's what carry is. So if someone on your team is feeding, or if they're in a bad position, you want to be able to play champions that can come back or can snowball advantages. And Soraka can do both of those. And the fact that you're going to have a lot of tanks. Not only are tanks in the jungle and tanks top lane, you know, going to be a lot better for healing, but a lot of times they come with engage. They come with a lot of CC. So you don't need it as much from the support role. So that makes Soraka even better. If you have a Sejuani, you don't necessarily need a Nautilus as much. It's nice. I mean, CC is always good, but Sejuani can start the fights and get it going. So anyways, I think she's really strong. Now, there are different builds you can do on her. Actually, like Ghost Poro better. Now, one build I've been trying out, and this might change in the preseason. We'll see how the meta shakes out. But I've really liked the Guardian, Font of Life, Bone Plating. Actually, like Conditioning there also. I've changed my mind on that. And I think that's really good. You have to have Revitalize. Revitalize is insanely OP on her. It gives you an extra 5% flat plus healing and shielding, but then it does 10% extra healing to people that are below 40% health. And that stacks multiplicatively with your other plus healing and shielding items. So for example, if you would heal for 100 and you have plus 40% plus healing and shielding, then it's going to calculate that up to 140, and then it's going to trigger the Revitalize for 10% of that on top, which is going to be an additional 14 instead of an additional 10 off the base heal, if that makes sense. So it's multiplicatively scaling because it's not technically plus healing and shielding on the second part of that rune. People get that confused. So it's even better than people think it is on healing. The first part is plus healing and shielding, but the second one is incoming healing and shielding, heals for an extra 10%. Now that also applies to you. So when you're below 40% healing and shielding, that also means your Q is healing you for more, and your ult is going to be healing you for more as well. So that's really important distinction there. So it's even better than people think it is. So you have to have Revitalize somewhere in your build. Now, I really like the Guardian because it gives you personal protection. Aery's the obvious one that most people are going to get, but I'm going to make the case for Guardian, then I'll explain Aery. So Guardian is, it gives you protection. Aery never protects you. So, you know, in that team fight, when they're trying to burst you out and you take Barrier and you come in with Barrier, you've got your Guardian trigger, you have Redemption, which is going to be falling on you in 2.5 seconds. So, like, let's say that, like, just Zed engages on you or whatever. You could immediately pop Barrier, pop Redemption, put it right on top of you, land a Q on him, and then press your ult for a heal, and that's going to give you Guardian. That's going to give... so you're going to have Guardian, Barrier, Redemption coming in, and your heal off of Q. You know, Zed might still kill you, but he better have a hell of a lot of items if he's going to burn you out. So Aery can't do that. Aery doesn't give you that extra burst healing and shielding. So I think that makes it really good, and it gives you movement speed, which allows you to reposition, and your AD carry to reposition as well. So it gives them a bigger burst shield. The same thing if the Zed goes on your AD carry, you're going to have that Guardian proc, which is going to give them a lot more like burst shield than it would off of Aery. And the name of the game really is, excuse me, the name of the game really is stopping burst. Because if the fight lasts a long time, you win as Soraka, basically by default. If fights last longer than 5 seconds, you're going to win. Like, the only time your team's going to lose fights is if someone gets bursted out immediately. So if, like, Talon comes in and one-shots your AD carry, or Rengar, or Zed, or whatever. So Guardian is a lot better at protecting the worst-case scenarios coming into you. That also allows you to go Font of Life, which Your Q is going to proc that on multiple people in fights a lot of times. So it gives a little bit of extra healing. You're already going to be healing for a bazillion anyways. So font is not like insane, but it's okay. The extra little bit of healing does add up, especially in these poke lanes with your Caitlyn's, your Senna's, your Sivers, and things like that. This Font of Life can add up. It can give an extra little bit of extra healing early on, because if you think your maximum health, it's 5 plus your max health early on. If you have like 500 health, you know, that's an extra 10 healing that somebody gets on hit. You know, if you land your Q and the Caitlyn auto attack somebody, you know, it's not insane, but you're going to get an extra at least 10 healing. And if she lands a couple of auto attacks, you might get up to, you know, 15, 20 healing off of that. So it does add up. It's not insane. It's okay. You could also take Demolish if you want to, if you think you're really going to push in and crush that lane. If they're running like Ezreal, Braum or something in the bot lane, you've got Caitlyn, Soraka, maybe you go Demolish. But those are pretty good. I like conditioning a lot because getting the extra, even just 9 bonus armor and magic resist is like 400 gold worth of value at 10 minutes, which is pretty nice. So it's okay. So that's kind of a scaling rune. But if you are facing all in and you're scared early, you can go bone planing. If it is Enchanter on Enchanter and you're afraid they're actually going to be able to outpoke you, maybe it's a Sona or something, it should be rare that that happens as Soraka. But if they have like severe poke, maybe you could go second wind. Then Revitalize, we talked about, is really OP. Now, if you go for this, that also opens up the ability to go for Domination as your secondary. So that's going to give you Ghost Poro, which once again gives you a ton of vision. Very important on Dragon, very important in a lot of poke lanes because you're going to be vulnerable to ganks. But it also gives you 30 AP, and we've already talked about the AP scaling is insane on Soraka. So getting that 30 AP at 15 to 20 minutes is really good. It's basically a better version of Gathering Storm, because Gathering Storm is going to give you 24 AP at 20 minutes. But before that, it really doesn't give you very much at all. So Ghost Poro gives you vision, and it gives you better scaling all the way up until 30 minutes. Yeah, when 30 minutes rolls around, getting 48 AP is going to be better. But I still think that's going to be rare in a lot of games, and it's just going to leave you too vulnerable in most games. So I think Ghost Poro is a much better alternative for most games than Gathering Storm is. And you get this selection of hunters, many of which are very good on her. So Ulti Hunter, obviously really good. She has a very high impact ult. It's fairly easy to stack it up with your ultimate because it's global. Relentless Hunter can help you dodge hooks if you're against like a hook champion or you think you need to rotate faster. It allows you to go Ionian boots and still have the mobility of Moby boots potentially. So that's really good. And then Ingenious, I think, is one that's really underappreciated but can be good if you're going to go for like a Mikhail's plus Redemption plus Shirelia's build. So if they have a lot of CC on their team, if you're up against, you know, an Ashe plus Thresh lane or Leona, Ashe or Varus, Nautilus or something like that, then getting Mikhail's early can be really good on Soraka. And then after you get Mikhail's, you're definitely going to want to get Redemption because you get triple the bonus plus healing and shielding on Redemption. And then after that, it's highly likely you would want something like Shirelia's for the additional plus healing and shielding. Although, you know, maybe you get Ardent Sensor after that. We'll see. But with Ingenious Hunter, you get basic... And all of those are like ults. I mean, Mikhail's is basically like a cleanse that someone gets for free, that your ADC gets without having to buy Quicksilver Sash. Obviously, it doesn't work on Malzahar and suppressions, but it's still pretty good. And then Redemption is just as powerful as a lot of ultimates, too. So it's basically like you get 2 extra ults when you have those items, and this gives you 40% cooldown on your ults. Is the best way to think of it. This also does affect sweepers, and people forget that. So it's going to give you a lot more sweep action later on in the game, so it's going to lower the cooldown on your sweeper by 40%. So I think that's really undervalued a lot of times, but... You know, I would only get this rune if you're going to be going for, if you know you're going to get Mikhail's early on. Like Mikhail's Redemption, Ingenious Hunter. If you think you're going to be going like Athene's Redemption, then I'd probably go Ulti Hunter. Because Athene's is not going to have an active on it, so Ingenious is going to lose a lot of value. But I think if you have 2 and certainly 3 activatable items, then Ingenious is certainly worth considering. The other build, which might come back, is Airy. This one does give you better poke because you can get Airy plus Scorch early on. So this is going to be great if they don't have a lot of sustain in their lane, if the AD carry's not going to get a Vamp Scepter, if the support doesn't have a lot of sustain. So now Nautilus and Leona will be much more vulnerable to this build. It can be pretty good. Mana Flow is okay. I mean, Nimbus Cloak can help you escape some awkward situations now with Barrier, especially if you're going Ionian Boots. Then, you know, you can get that extra movement speed. It's kind of awkward. You'll probably still want Mana Flow. Mana flow is not amazing on her because she already has really good mana management. She's going to get a ton of fairy charms, but it's okay. Airy is really good. You know, early on it gives poke. The problem with Airy later on is you're going to be landing autos, you're going to be landing Qs a lot, so a lot of the time the Airy is not going to be shielding people, but rather it's going to be going towards damage. If you're really good at watching where the Airy is in a team fight and you know you're going to be able to stop and not hit people with Qs or auto attacks, and you're still going to be able to get the shield off of Airy with the healing, then it can be really good, but it requires a lot of extra micromanagement later on in the game to get Airy correct. So Airy is still good, but it's just a lot more lane focused, I think. So if you can dominate the lane with the damage off of Airy, with Scorch, with Absolute Focus, and the healing and shielding you get off of that, which is kind of awkward on her. You can do Transcendence also if you want, although that doesn't really kick into like 20 minutes. I mean, she does heal herself, but she also takes damage when she heals, so Absolute can be okay. But in general, I think that the supporting cast here of these things is going to be weaker. Now, so what it's going to come down to is Airy versus Guardian. Do you want like more potential sustained shielding on other people, or do you want more burst shielding on yourself and other people in a fight? So that's one question for Airy versus this. As far as the secondaries, you're always going to get Revitalize, and I would say you probably always get Conditioning. So what it's going to come down to is, you know, would you rather have Font of Life plus Ghost Poro plus like Ulti Hunter, or would you rather have Mana Flow Band, Absolute Focus, and Scorch? I would rather have the first. I would rather have the Font, Poro, Hunter, because I think those scale a lot better into the mid game. This is going to give you more pressure in the early game with Absolute Focus plus Scorch. So it's really up to you. I just think that this tree right here is just not going to be great on her because she really doesn't need Mana Flow. Like, it's nice, but I don't know. That's where I stand on it. We'll see. If you can poke out a lot, like I said, if you have, like, you know, Caitlyn on your team and the enemy team has, like, Ezreal, you know, Nautilus or something like that, then yes, maybe you can poke them out and get a huge advantage early. It just depends on if you want early or mid game. Okay, so that's a ton on Soraka. I want to make the case for her. I think she's going to be the biggest beneficiary of the preseason, so I want to spend a lot of time on her. But let's get to the other ones real quick. Senna's another one. We'll spend a good chunk on Senna, then we'll go through the other ones a bit faster here. So Senna is a champion that is far better than I thought she was going to be early on. I knew she had the potential to be strong, but I thought that it would take people a lot more time to get used to how to play her. So items are still a little awkward on her. I'm going to do, I guess I can do an entirely separate Senna guide, so I'm not going to go over all of the ins and outs of her. I did one that was a little misinformed earlier on because there was bad information on the PvE, so I'm going to do an updated version. But in general, like, what makes Senna strong is she has an insanely strong laning phase. So the main reason for this is Piercing Darkness just has crazy range on it. So it's pretty much 1300 range, which is nutty early on with her. So if you cast this Q through a minion wave, and this can be, you can target your allies, you can target allied minions, you can target wards, towers, enemy minions, anything. You just get insane poke off of this. 1300 range is so far. That's like Xerath's Q range. It might even be further. It's so far, and it's so fast, it's almost impossible to dodge it. Whenever she activates it, it's almost guaranteed to hit you. And at the same time, when excuse me, when she casts this through her through a minion wave, she helps push the wave as well. So she's pushing the wave in. She heals herself every time she casts this, and she also heals allies if you hit allies with this. Oh. Sorry, that was kind of gross. Wanted to spare you guys that, so had to get that mute in there. But anyway, so sorry, I'm sick. I'm still kind of getting over this illness I've had for a while, but still trying to bring you guys all the content. So it's just insanely efficient poke. If you have Aryan Scorch, it's also going to apply Aryan Scorch, which is going to be the best build on her. So it heals yourself, potentially heals your ally, pushes the wave, and harasses the enemy all in one ability. And does pretty good damage. I mean, it's 50% of your bonus AD. Now, the damage looks kind of unassuming early on. It's just like 50 physical damage. But it does add up. It does add up over time. Okay. And it looks like the cooldown is really high at 15. But if you just keep landing auto attacks, then it actually gets pretty low. So in the mid game, if you get like 30% cooldown reduction, you know, this is going to go down to like 10 seconds. And then if you auto attack, you know, like 3 or 4 times in between, you know, you can get this down to like 5 or 6 seconds. So it actually gets to be pretty low over time. So that's just really good trading in lane. People can't really trade back with her. It's very difficult to trade with her. So she's going to be excellent with these poke push, Kerchai Shard type of meta that I think we might go into with like Caitlyn, Sivir, Jhin, Senna ADC obviously is not going to matter with Senna support. But yeah, so that's really strong. Scales pretty well throughout the game. I mean, the healing, once again, looks kind of unassuming. It's like, okay, like the heal's not that big. But you got to remember, usually healing 2 people, you're healing yourself plus 1 other person. So that's basically a 240 base case heal. It's 40% of your bonus AD. Now, I'm not going to recommend building a bunch of AD on her as support. But you got to remember, you do get bonus AD off of landing your auto attacks on people. I think it's every mist gives you 1 bonus attack damage. So in the mid game, you're probably going to have 50 or 60 off of this. So, you know, that's going to give you, if you have 60, maybe like 40 or so, 35 or 40 extra healing off of this. So, you know, that's going to end up being, you know, close to like a 300 base case healing, maybe a 320 base case with an additional 0.5 ratio. So, pretty legit, pretty good. And then Last Embrace can CC someone for up to 2.25 seconds. This is a long time. That's like a Fiddlesticks Fear duration. And it's got pretty good range on it as well, on a reasonably low cooldown. For something that CCs for that long, it's got a long cooldown. And it can also CC multiple people. So after a short duration, I think it's 1 second, then you can CC 2 or 3 people. So in team fights, you know, that's going to be pretty good overall. And the damage on it's not bad either at 250. This is what you'll max second. Then you have the Curse of the Black Mist. Ironically enough, I think this is actually one of the least OP things in her kit. Everyone is saying this is what would make her OP. A lot of times, I don't even see Senna's use this like super well, and it still ends up being very strong. So it can give your team 20% bonus movement speed when you run in, and then especially when tanks start coming into the meta, it's going to be really tricky. If you've got like an assassin in the cloud, a tank in the cloud, and like an ADC in the cloud, it's going to be hard to tell who's who, how to target people, and things like that. So, you know, that is pretty good as well. And then her ult is semi-global, kind of like Soraka, so I think that that's going to be pretty good, especially with something like Ulti Hunter. It does, like, pretty decent damage, 100% of your bonus AD. It's, like, pretty strong damage, and then a pretty good heal as well. So, she's particularly just super strong in the laning phase, scales fairly well. She's not going to scale as strong as Soraka with plus healing and shielding, but it's still pretty decent considering that you can hit multiple targets with Piercing Darkness. Your ult hits multiple targets. So, it's pretty solid. And she does have a good piece of CC. So, like, running at her is actually kind of tricky because if she hits you with this, you know, the gank's done. She can do Curse of Black Mist and get her ally out of there. So, I think that makes her really good. Really oppressive in the early game. She does get some scaling off of her souls or whatever. So, pretty good. So, even without items, she's going to be pretty good. Now, the itemization is still a little weird on her, but what I've seen work the best is, like, an Athene's into Redemption build. Because you do put up quite a bit of damage between your ults and Piercing Darkness also doing damage. Then, now, I think how this triggers, if you Piercing Darkness and you hit an enemy and an ally, I believe, from what I saw from other videos, it does the damage first, and then it does the healing after that. So, you're going to get the extra bonus healing from Athene's off of the first, off of 1Q, pretty much, if you hit enemies and allies on it. So, that's really strong. And then Redemption is nice, too. It just gives you a little bit more team fight presence. It scales really well with Athene's. Now, her AP scaling is not insane. You know, it's only 40% here. It does affect the damage here on the ult, and it does affect your your piercing darkness, but the ratio is not insane. But it's just kind of one of the best things you can be doing is the Athenes because of the passive healing on it, and then the redemption is just a good item overall. So, and then you can get Ardent Sensor. She might also be a target for Shirelia's because you can activate Shirelia's while everyone's shrouded to get even more bonus movement speed. So, we'll see if that's an item that she wants. It's possible that she might want that instead of Ardent Sensor. We'll see. You can still go for, you know, like the Ghost Blade, Dust Blade build if you want. The new Umbral item might be pretty good on her as well. So we'll see. She does have some other options, but I still think that kind of the full-on Enchanter build is going to be the best build. And then you just want Airy, Absolute Focus, and Scorch, just maximum poke in lane. And then Mana Flow Band is actually pretty good. She can start running out of mana fairly early on. And then just Ghost Poro early on. You know, a little bit of extra vision to help you push. Gives you the extra AD or AP, adaptive. And you get the Ulti Hunter, which is going to be really powerful with her ult. So I think she's pretty good. She's actually has quite a high win rate right now, considering it's her first... you know, first patch, she's at 52.3%. Even with a lot of people not knowing how to play her and her being extremely popular, she can be really strong. And then surprisingly, as ADC, she's creeping up there too. She's almost 54% as ADC. And this is before the Kerchai Shard nerfs or buffs, which I think are going to be huge on her. Because right now, like, her itemization is just so weird. Because crit gets reduced effects, and she really doesn't want a ton of attack speed. But the Kerchai Shard... you know, something like Rapid Fire Cannon, it could be very, very strong on her, or even Static Shiv, just to help you push in. Can potentially be really good. So, I think that she's going to continue to be very strong right now. But let's go ahead and move on to other people. So, I'm going to have a whole guide, maybe over the next couple of days, I'll release a guide on her that's updated to reflect accurate information and talk about all the changes in items and all that kind of stuff. Okay, Nami is another one I think is going to be pretty strong. Now, Nami doesn't scale as well as a lot of the other champs out there, but Nami is one of the premier early game harassers because her harass is guaranteed. You can't miss your wave. You just walk up and press wave on somebody, and it's going to do its thing. So she's a good Ardent Sensor abuser, and she's one of the few enchanters that actually does have kill threat. So if you do land that bubble on somebody and you're with someone like a Caitlyn and they land that trap or a Jhin and he follows up with his W, you can actually do pretty good burst damage early on the Nami. So I think that, you know, she does have a lot of potential. You know, she's not going to scale as hard with plus healing and shielding as a Soraka or a Sona, but at the same time, you do have the kill threat off of the bubble. You do have really good peel off of your wave, which is on a fairly short cooldown. It's very good follow-up as well. If your team has CC, like you've got a Malachi or a Sejuani, or something like that, then it's very good follow-up CC because they're not going to be able to dodge the wave as well. So I think that she is really strong. Anyone that's going to get like Rapid Fire Cannon, which would be like a Jhin or a Caitlyn, the E is really nice because it is going to apply that extra on-hit damage and allow for more follow-up. So I think that I think she's going to be pretty strong right now. So I'd go for... So she's the person that you want if you want a bit more kill threat, a bit more all-in on the early game. Than someone over like a Soraka or a Senna. Now, Senna does have good all-in, too, with her W. I mean, Senna might be the number one. I still think Soraka and just her scaling, it would put her number one, but I could definitely see an argument for Senna potentially being number one right now. But yeah, you just want to go Airy, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Scorch, and then Bone Plating and Revitalize is one option. You can do... like the Ulti Hunter Ghost Poro. Her ult is not as impactful as something like Senna or Soraka. It's still pretty nice. So it's kind of up to you. You have a bit more flexibility with what you want to get in there. I like conditioning. I just think that the value on that is so high. Bone Plating is good like pre 10 minutes, but after 10 minutes, conditioning I think is going to be better. So, you know, it's up to you. There are some possibilities with the secondary, but I think she's going to be pretty good right now. And then Sona is another one who's kind of like an in-betweener. You know, if you want more scaling than Nami, but you want a little bit more CC than someone like a Soraka or a bit more guaranteed poke. Because Soraka, you do have to land your Qs, versus Nami, you just like press W on them and it works. Sona, you just press Q and it works. I think Sona will start coming back, though. So Sona was nerfed, and she doesn't have the highest win rate right now. but I think in many ways she's the most vulnerable to those all-in champions, maybe even more vulnerable than Soraka, because Soraka at least has an R to heal herself for a ton, for like burst healing, and her Q does give her some consistent movement speed to try to escape. Sona really doesn't have much at all to try to escape, right? She doesn't have burst healing she can do on herself. She does have the speed up of Song of Celerity, but it's not as much speed up as Soraka's, like, burst speed as Soraka's Q, because Soraka's Q also slows the enemy and speeds you up. So, but she does still scale insanely strong with plus healing and shielding and AP. She still has crazy ratios here in team fights specifically. Now, this doesn't look as high. It's like, what are you saying crazy ratios? It's a 0.3. Remember, this can apply to everybody, and it's going to be on like a 3-second cooldown later in the game, because she gets extra cooldown, 25% off of her crescendo at level 11, and you're probably going to have 30% CDR by then, so it's going to go down to about 3 seconds. So even if you're just healing, like, because this is what you're going to max. Typically, you'll get 2 or 3 points in Hymn of Valor, then the mid-game, you'll have this maxed out. So even if you're healing, like, 3 people with this, you're going to get 210 base with a 0.5 ratio, yourself and one other person. And then the shield is going to put up an extra 375 with a 0.9 ratio. So that's going to be a 1.4 total AP ratio with 375 plus 210 base. So like a 585 base. So that's obviously going to be really good. And that's just 3 people. That's just you and 2 other people getting this benefit. If you have a full-on 5v5 team fight, it's going to be much stronger on a 3-second cooldown. So it's similar to Soraka. You know, Soraka, she has more burst healing, you know, off of pressing her ult. And she can heal, like, single targets a lot more with just spamming her W on a lower cooldown. But if we're talking multiple targets, then Sona's going to be kind of the queen of that. A lot of this is a shield as well, which that's really important. If they get Morellonomicon or Executioners or anything like that, the shield is not affected by that. So if they have that, she might put up even more plus healing and shielding in fights than Soraka, because it's not getting reduced by 40%. But one of the big sort of things, I still think Soraka late game, if you're just talking a raw heal off, Soraka is going to deal more. But one of the nice things about her is she does put out like guaranteed poke damage in the lane with Hymn of Valor plus Airy plus Scorch. Is a lot, and you can't really miss it. It's 825 range. You just press Q and it works. If you land your auto, that's nice. That's a bonus. But if it's too scary to try to land autos, then even just doing the Q is nice. It allows you to proc or to stack up your Frostfang really easily as well. So that's good. Excuse me. And then obviously you have Crescendo as well. One of her big claims to fame. This is excellent for team fighting. You know, if you have like a Misfortune on your team, or you've got like an Amumu jungle, or a Kennen, or a Rumble, or a Jarvan, or whatever that can CC people, and you chain it together with Crescendo, that's really good. And that's something that Soraka doesn't offer. She doesn't have that point click, like hard stun on multiple targets. The silence is good, but it's not a stun. So that is really handy. That is really powerful. So also her W can put Ardent Sensor on everyone. It really evenly distributes things like Athene's on everyone. So she is very high scaling. I would say it's similar to Soraka, maybe even higher if they have Grievous Wounds. She has more consistent poke in the laning phase, but she has lower single target healing. She's a little bit less safe, and she doesn't have as much roam pressure because she doesn't have the Soraka R, which is global. So it just kind of depends on what you need, what you want. But I think in a team fight comp where you really want that extra piece of CC layering, then Soraka might be your girl, especially if they don't have a Leona or they don't have a like a Nautilus or something like that. I think that she can still scale and be really strong. So a lot of people have forgotten about Sona. She's one of the lower win rate enchanters right now, but a lot of that is because she just doesn't have a good answer to the Leona and the Nautilus, who are so strong. So it's still respectable. It's still 51%, but I think that it's affecting her a lot more than it's affecting Soraka, because Soraka can do the burst healing. Now, I would with her, so you're just going to get the standard items, the Athene's, Ardent, Redemption, whatever makes sense given your situation. But I would potentially take Barrier on her for the same reason I would take Barrier on Soraka, and I like Barrier on Senna too, is because a lot of times you're not going to be close enough, or it's not going to be safe enough to ignite. Exhaust is good, but once again, you have to be close. And if they like front load a lot of damage on you, so if Zed goes on you, does a lot, or Talon or something like that, if they do 80% of your health, then Exhaust is not going to get a ton of value. But Barrier is still going to get full value no matter what whenever they're coming in. Barrier also blocks Ignite damage. Exhaust does not reduce Ignite damage in any way, shape, or form because it's true damage, and Exhaust doesn't affect true damage. So that's important to keep in mind. So when you're in these all-ins in the early game and the enemy hard engage champ puts Ignite on you, you're much more likely to die if you have Exhaust than if you have Barrier. Barrier is also on a lower cooldown. Barrier also scales with plus healing and shielding. People forget that, but it does. It scales with plus healing and shielding. Exhaust obviously doesn't. So Exhaust is good. Exhaust does help your AD carry survive a little bit longer, but Barrier is much better to keep you personally alive. And the thing is, if you're alive, you're going to be able to throw out more heals, and ultimately, that could potentially be even better for your AD carry than the Exhaust. It depends on the situation. With Soraka, almost certainly, because you have really high burst healing on single targets. Sona, not as much, but, you know, if you can stay alive, then you can still, you know, maybe get your ult off, or maybe get off an extra W or two. You know, that can make a huge difference in fights. So, it's something to consider. Okay, Janna's next up. Now, Janna is kind of in an interesting spot. A lot of people have been going Comet on Janna. I got to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of that build. I've tried it out. Maybe I'm just an old fogey, you know, setting my ways from seasons past. But I still like the Airy build a lot more. It still gives you reasonable poke. It just scales so much better later on into the game than Comet does. Yeah, Janna's still pretty good. You know, she still does have kind of a high cooldown on her shield compared to other people, you know, with the 12 seconds. Certainly compared to like Soraka or Sona, who are going to have like 2 seconds on their healing and shielding abilities. But it's still really good. It's a 100% a shield, so it doesn't get affected by Morellonomicon, you know, Grievous Wounds, all that kind of stuff. And it actually powers up your AD carry. Now, that's something that Soraka and Sona don't do. Is if you have an AD carry who's scaling hard, you've got the Jinx, you've got the Twitch, you've got the Kaisa, something like that, throwing the extra AD on there is a very big deal, especially on crit champions, because this can crit. You know, if you put the shield on, like your Caitlyn, and she attacks 5 times while the shield is up, it's not just 200 extra damage, but if like 2 of those shots crit, if she has 40% crit, or 50% crit, I guess, then, you know, they do even more damage. So then it's 240 damage. So in a lot of situations, like late game, when you have this with the 70% AD, it's going to be, you know, around like a 300 or 350 shield. And if it doesn't break, if you put it on your AD carry, then it's going to throw out, you know, an extra like 300 damage. So don't think of this as just a shield. It's also damage. So just imagine there's an ability that says deals 300 damage and heals for, or like shields for 300. That's kind of what you're getting with her. So, it is pretty nice. She does have long range. 800 range on the shield is a big deal. You know, with Soraka, you have to get, like, close. You have to be within 450 range. With Sona, you need to be around that same range as well if you want to put the shield on them with the aura. So, she can stay a lot further back. She also gets really good movement speeds that allows you to dodge hooks, that allows you to rotate around the map quickly. So, that's very handy. She has a good point-click harass with her Zephyr. She does not have a self-heal, though. So that makes the matchups against things like a Senna, like a Soraka, like a Sona, Nami, a little bit trickier in the early game because they're going to be able to poke you out potentially a lot easier. So that's why she's a bit lower down the list here, is because like her matchup against other enchanters can be kind of sketchy depending on what's going on. But she does have a lot of peel. So against like hard engaged tanks, you know, against things like a Sejuani, like a Mundo. I guess Mundo's not super hard engaged, but like Jarvan, you know, she's going to make their lives a lot tougher because this Howling Gale has really nice peel to it. And your ultimate also has really good peel, that pushback. You know, the Sona does have her ult for the stun, but, you know, Soraka doesn't have very much peel. Senna's peel is okay, it's limited. If you hit your W, it's good. Otherwise, if they flash it or something, it's going to be rough. But she does have really good pushback, really good peel. So great with someone like a Jinx who's going to get crit that you just want to keep people off of them. And if they survive, they're going to win. Now, the Monsoon is interesting. It does have the pushback. It has really high potential for healing, but people have to stand in it the whole time. It has to channel for 3 seconds, and it can be interrupted. and it's on a long cooldown, 150 seconds compared to a lot of the other ults out there. So she is really good. Janna's thing is she peels a lot better, and she gives really good scaling to your ADC through the shield. So I think that she's going to remain very strong, particularly with crit champions that are going to have really high scaling, you know, like Jinx specifically, but then Twitch, and to a lesser extent, you know, Caitlyn and Sivir. They are pretty good, but it's just not quite as good with them, although it's still pretty decent with them. So I'm going to go back to Aerie. I know Comet's really popular, but I think Aerie scales a lot better. And then Scorch, and I would probably just go for Ghost Poro and Ulti Hunter. You are missing out on Revitalize, but I don't know. You could go Revitalize Conditioning as well if you want to. I really like the Ghost Poro. That 30 extra AP is a big deal in the mid game. And then Ulti Hunter is really nice as well. You do have a high impact ult. You're not going to be using it on cooldown as much as some of the hard engage supports, but it's still going to be pretty decent. And then Frostfang. And I would probably go Ionian Boots instead of Mobility just to make up for that 10% CDR you're going to be missing on your warding item, and then just Athene's Ardent Redemption. So she's still going to be pretty good if they have a lot of hard engage, especially if you have a hyper-scaling ADC that can really leverage the extra AD that you're throwing on them. I think that she can be good, but she might potentially have a tougher matchup if she gets poked out early by things like Nami, Sona, Senna, Soraka, who I expect to be pretty popular. Okay. So countering these champions, I think if we get down into tier 2, so tier 1 are what I think are going to be like sort of the best case in a vacuum. These are going to be the strongest champions for the meta for your team. When you start getting into tier 2, some of these champions are going to be the counters to those champions, but I think the changes to things like Relic Shield and all the stuff I talked about in the past video are going to make these a bit weaker. So I think that Blitz is probably going to be, you know, #1 counter to these champs. He has the strongest hook. He has really high burst damage. It's going to be very difficult for them to heal through Blitzcrank. He has a really long range on this grab, so you could potentially hang out in the alcove outside of vision and try to go for some of these grabs. So, you know, his grab's still going to be really good. Has that high burst damage. Doesn't care as much about sort of the Relic Shield changes because he can stay so safely back. He doesn't have to hard engage himself. So that's not going to matter like as much for him. You can get some Fairy Charm items on him. That's not common, but, you know, you could, in theory, get some stuff like that. Or you can at least get some mana items early without losing out too much. I had honestly thought about doing something like Glacial Augment on him or like Spooky Ghost. Like, he does have good, you know, he does have good AP ratios. If you get AP on him, it's not terrible. It might be a little too cute, you know. We'll see. He does like getting Righteous Glory early on, and I think that's what a lot of champs are going to move towards now. I think they're going to move away from Zeke's towards Righteous Glory so that you get that regen early, so you can get cause I feel like you're going to have a rejuve bead, and that's the best rejuve bead thing to get, or you're just going to get poked out and murdered by the enchanters. So we'll see how that pans out. Righteous Glory is more expensive than other items, but it is pretty good. And Blitz is one of the better users of that. It gives him a lot of movement speed, and it allows him to run up, get that slow, and then land the hook after they flash or dash. So I think he'll still be pretty good. You know, he's very hook dependent. If you land the hook, he's a god. If you don't, he's bad. But the difference between him and other hook champions is you put up a ton of burst. He puts up way more burst than Nautilus does or Leona does. He has less, like, CC than they do, but I think you just got to go for the power. If you're not playing an enchanter, you damn well better kill the enchanters a lot early on, or you're just going to get run over with how the meta is shaping up. So the fact that there will be other tanks running around in other roles is going to be rough for him in the mid to late game, because obviously you don't want to pull the Malachi or the Ornn or something in. But if we do see less Nautiluses and less Leonas, if it's just all enchanters, those are squishy targets for the bot lane. So I think that he's still going to be pretty good. If you want to go for hard engage, he's probably going to be your best bet. You can still take Aftershock. You know, there might be some other options out there. I don't know. I mean, maybe he could take Guardian instead. I still think you do Spellbook. Predator's possible, I guess. That feels a little wacky. Yeah, I mean, maybe Guardian. You don't need Aftershock as much because you're pulling people towards you. So maybe just going for Guardian. Remember that you can trigger Guardian just by standing close to somebody, like close to your ADC or whatever. And you are going to be standing probably fairly close to them when you pull people in because you can hang out on the back line. So maybe just substituting Guardian. I don't know. Maybe people still go Aftershock. You know, maybe Glacial Augment with if you want to go for like a GLP Twin Shadows build. Maybe that becomes a little bit more viable. You can put the slow on people, so if you don't kill them off of the initial hook and like explosion of damage, having that slow with the Glacial Augment could help out a little bit. So, you know, we'll see. Let me see here. Now, I've never tried that with Zeke's. That'd be interesting. I don't know why I've never tried that combination, but like slowing an enemy champion with an item active, so that would work with Zeke's. You would throw out the 600 frozen line around them. So pulling people in, if you rush Zeke's early on and you have Glacial Augment, maybe that still works. I don't know. I haven't tried that out. But I think that there'll be some combination of Blitz that'll be useful. Zyra, still going to be good. And, you know, on the surface, you would think a lot of this stuff helps out Zyra. Okay, so they're not going to have as much hard engage. You're going to be able to poke people out more. You're going to have more money for scaling with your items. But the problem is Enchanters outscale Zyra later on in the game, and they're probably going to be able to heal through a lot of your own poke, especially because like you're not going to have the Spell Thieves procs, which she could use so well early on. So she'll be okay, but I just think that you're going to get pushed in a lot of times and just bullied out by the Soraka, by the Senna. Senna specifically is probably a nightmare for Zyra to deal with because she can poke you from afar so easily, and you don't have any sustain yourself. So it seems like this should be good for Zyra because she's been so great with the poke and push, or poke and push meta of the past when it's been like Caitlyn, Ezreal, and then you have like either a Karma or a Zyra. I mean, that was basically the meta on the back half of Season 6 Worlds, I think. It might have been Season 7. I think it was maybe Season 7 with the poke and push with like the Caitlyn, Trist, Ezreal, and then you had the Zyra and the Karma. And then you had the infamous Misfortune support that came in to counter that. I think it'll be a similar problem with her, where there's just going to be a lot more kind of long-range champions that are going to give her a hard time. But she might still be all right. You know, Comet, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Scorch, Taste of Blood, Ulti Hunter. She can push. She can put people under tower. Just the problem is, can you get enough of an advantage early on in order to outscale the Enchanters? So we'll see. It remains to be seen, but she'll definitely be up there. She'll definitely be, you know, on the strong side potentially if you have that poke. It's just you're basically going for more all-in burst and more like burst damage later on rather than scaling if you go for the Zyra over something like a Senna or a Soraka. Mid-game scaling, I should say. Once you get your boots plus like your Oblivion Orb, you can really contest those dragons very heavily before the Enchanters are able to get to support items. But you're going to have a very narrow window where that happens. So it's going to depend on the matchup. But there might be some cases where she could be pretty strong. So it's just, I think it's going to be a little tougher just because of itemization and the prevalence of a lot of these other kind of poke champs, especially Soraka and Senna. Might make it a bit harder on her. Lux is someone that should be good. I mean, she has been nerfed a lot. Her win rate, I think, is down a little bit from, certainly from where it used to be back in the day. Yeah, she's down at 49. So she does put out good harassment with her E. The Aftershock build's definitely dead on her, though. So we'll just go ahead and get rid of that. Dang it. Let me just do it this way. So yeah, that build is definitely donezo on this patch. But yeah, I think the Comet's still pretty good. Scorch is still, you know, that kind of stuff's still pretty good on her. The big problem is, like, her W is very conditional to get that shield. It's kind of tricky. You do have good poke, but it does cost her a lot of mana. Typically, you know, people try to get Ludens and things like that on her. You can still do Athenes plus Ardent Censer. I just feel like Senna is going to be a better version of Lux, where you can put out pressure and scale potentially a little bit better than she does. So Lux will still be okay, you know, maybe into some matchups, but I just think you're going to get outscaled. However, you know, against Zyra, against some of these other champs, she does kind of fit the push and poke theme. She does put out some really good poke with Airy, Scorch, plus her E. So, and she does have a really good bind. So you land that bind, and Jhin lands his W, or Caitlyn puts a trap on him, or whatever. It is going to be a death sentence. Like, they're going to die if you do that. So she does have some kill threat, kind of similar to Senna if she lands her W on somebody. So she's got a bunch of different stuff going on with her. I think she's just going to be a bit harder to play, a bit harder to execute, and a bit less reliable than some of the other supports. But she'll probably be all right. The fact that Nautilus and Leona are going to get hit a lot is going to help her out. Then we have Rakan. So Rakan is going to like that Nautilus and Leona are disappearing. He is going to be a really good engage. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and put him up. I usually don't do this in the middle of a video, but I'm going to go ahead and put him up a bit higher. So that might be a bit confusing with the timestamps and things like that. But I do think that he is going to be a decent solution into things like Soraka, into things like Senna, because you will have hard engage, but he also scales like an enchanter. His shield is really good, has a 1.6 AP ratio with like a 280 base. And so I think he'll be all right. He does have his own sustain with Q in lane. It will be a little bit trickier. He can get bullied out early on, potentially. He doesn't have as much push potential. So I definitely don't think he's going to be tier 1 anymore, but he is going to be one of the better, more reliable hard engage on these enchanters later on. So Blitz is like early game, pressure, but kind of weaker scaling, and then Rakan is really good scaling, but a little bit weaker early on. But yeah, I still think if you're a good Rakan player, I still think you'll be able to make it happen. You'll still be strong with him. And Nautilus, I still think will be okay. I mean, he's still got all of his same stuff, a ton of CC. If you're able to hook and engage on these enchanters early, you can definitely kill him. But his ult was nerfed. You are losing some of your damage at level 6 all in now. And you don't have as much sustain. You can potentially get poked out. So that can be problematic. And then you're just not going to scale as well as a lot of these other enchanters. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I do think that Nautilus is going to fall. What's he at right now? 53. I think he'll fall down to like 51%. I think Leona's going to fall down to 51. And I think you're going to see things like Soraka and Janna definitely pop up into the 54 range. I think Senna is probably going to go up to like 53. So I think there's going to be like a 2 or 3% shift. Tanks will go down that much, enchanters will go up that much, would be my prediction. So he's still all right, but he doesn't have the same level of burst as Blitz, and I just think he's just going to get poked out, and people are just going to be able to out-trade him in the laning phase. Okay, Yuumi, in theory, should be pretty good here, right? There's going to be less hard engage. She can poke with her Q. The problem is, it's just not enough damage, and she just doesn't have enough sustain in the early game. I think she's going to be sitting under tower a lot, potentially. She doesn't have any wave clear. So we'll see. I mean, she does offer the movement speed. She is really good with tanks. She does have a great engage later on in the game. The loss of presence of mind is going to hurt her, but she can do, Ghost Poro plus Ulti Hunter and still be all right. So she's okay, but, she has a really, really low win rate overall. It's hard to, put a champion that has a 42% win rate when there are other similar scaling champions that are, like 11% higher, like Soraka and Janna for solo queue. So like select Yuumis that are really good. You can still make her work, but it's gonna be rough out there. Leona, she can do decent burst damage early on. You could make an argument for putting her over Nautilus, because she is very good against enchanters. It's just Nautilus is a bit more reliable, and I think his CC just kind of scales better later on into the game. But I think she's going to be in trouble. She can get poked out. She does have really good hard engage, but if a lot of enchanters, start taking barrier into things like her, which I highly recommend. People are already doing that on Soraka. A lot more people are doing that on Senna. It's going to be difficult to burst them out. If you do catch them, the thing is, you're going to get their barrier, but they're also going to knock off like 50% of your health on the trade, and you're not going to have any sustain for that anymore, or it's going to be a lot harder. You'll probably go Righteous Glory on her, but still, the sustain is going to be an issue without the Relic procs and without getting the 50% plus heal or HP regen in lane off of Targons anymore. It's just really scary to take a trade, because if you go all in and you don't get that kill, it's going to be rough out there. So, anyways, I put her down a little bit lower because of that. Bard, I just feel like he's going to get outscaled. Maybe put up early pressure, but I mean, he does kind of have some wave clear with his meeps, but you want to hold on to your meeps for trades. Bard's just weird. You know, if you're very good on Bard, you can definitely make him work. You know, he does have interesting interactions with the alcoves. We'll see. Maybe it's really OP with junglers to, like, come in through the alcoves instead of the come. Like, you'll have more, like, places you can play around vision. But in general, I think it'll probably be a little rough for Bard out there. Because I think the enchanters are going to be so strong. But, you know, if you can apply early pressure, it definitely can work. And then these down here, I just went ahead and put them down as kind of honorable mentions. You got Morgana, Pike, Thresh, and Karma. Morgana's really bad against other enchanters because they, especially something like Soraka, because they can just get them Mikhails, and then basically, you know, they cancel out a lot of your binds. And you're just gonna, she just doesn't have the numbers. Her stuff is on such a low cooldown, like her Black Shield's on like a 20-second cooldown. Her W doesn't do anything outside the laning phase. You know, her ult is really close range and dangerous. I think she's going to fall a lot. Where is she right now? I mean, she's not going to go to, like, Yuumi level falling, but I think she'll fall down to, like, 48% or something like that. Like, because she's good against the Nautilus and the Leonas, but they're going to fall a lot, too. So, we'll see. Pike, it's rough out there for Pike. I thought that the regen wouldn't matter. It turns out it did matter a lot, and it's going to matter a lot more now that you can't get any healing off of Relic Shield or Targon. So that knocked him down like 2 or 3%. So I was, you know, I was pretty wrong about that. I thought, it's not going to matter. Pike will still be good. Well, it turns out it does. And it's going to matter even more now. So it's just rough out there. In theory, he is good against enchanters. If you land your hook, if you do get ahead early on, you can get those executes. The executes do go through barrier. They do go through shields. So that's nice. But with a lot of the healing from things like Soraka, Senna, stuff like that, I just think it's going to be tough out there. Especially because you're going to be in a heavy poke meta right now where you're going to be just spending pretty much your whole time under tower if you pick Pike, I think. So I think that's going to be rough. Same thing with Thresh. It's like, yes, Thresh is good against enchanters, but he doesn't have sustain. And I just think you're going to be hanging out under tower. Karma seems like she should be good in a push-poke meta, and historically she has been. I just think that she's been nerfed so hard and that other champions are taking her place. You know, Soraka can push the waves really easily with Qs if she wants to. Senna can push waves. You know, Nami, Sona, Janna, they can all auto-attack minions and push in. So I just think she's just going to get outscaled by other champs. And Lulu is someone that I didn't mention on here, but is kind of a conspicuous omission. Which I guess I could put on there. I'll just put her down here. It looks kind of dirty to have an extra page just kind of open like that. But the thing about Lulu, and I get asked about her occasionally, is that she's almost always one of the lowest win rate enchanters, even in enchanter metas. And a lot of people might think, well, why is that? Why is she so low? I mean, she's hanging out down here. There are some that are lower, but the main thing with Lulu is that... So I can pull her up here just real quick. And I know we're pretty much at time, but I feel like I need to mention Lulu. If you have someone that scales really heavily off of attack speed, you know, like a Jinx, like a Twitch, kind of famously, a Kog'Maw is really good with Lulu. She can work. But the issue is she has really bad matchups against other enchanters, typically. Part of that is she doesn't have a heal in her kit. So, kind of like Janna... you're going to have a hard time against Soraka, Sona, Nami, Senna, things like that in the lane. It's going to be tough. But then her AP ratios aren't that amazing. She only has a 0.6 on her shield, and they did buff the shield to 240 base, which is nice. It's got a 10-second cooldown. It's a shorter range. It's 650 range, so you have to get a bit closer than you do with Janna, which is very relevant. And it's only got a 0.6 instead of like Janna's 0.7. And then her ult only has a 0.5 ratio, which is really weak. You know, a Soraka's effectively has like a 400, 400% ratio on it. Janna's, if she gets a full channeled ult, is going to have, you know, hundreds of percentage ratio on it. So, and it's only single target. You just heal and stop one person versus, you know, the Soraka, and the Janna, it's going to be multiple people. Senna, multiple people, you know, over 100% ratio if you're hitting multiple people. even Sona and Nami, like, it still hits multiple people. It's not a heal or a shield, but you still CCing usually 2 or 3 people. So the fact that it's single target is rough. It can knock up people, which is good. It's also bonus health. So this does get around Morellonomicon. It does get around Ignite, which is nice, but it does not benefit at all from plus healing and shielding, which is a real feels bad. So it's like, yes, the 300 looks good, but, you know, if this was a 300 shield and, you know, you factor in Revitalize, you factor in the plus healing and shielding stat, it would be so much higher if it was an actual heal. So that's just kind of rough, is that she doesn't scale as well with things like Ardent Sensor, with things like Redemption, Revitalize. All of those are just really, really OP on most enchanters, and they're not good on Lulu. Like, she's still gonna get them. It still works with her, like, her E, but it doesn't work with her ult. So it's okay if you have the plus, you know, if you have, like, the Rage Blade users, which I think are going to be in a really rough spot because the Kerchai Shard is going to put so much pressure on them early. And she's going to get bullied out by the Nami. Like, maybe you could put her into tier 3, but I just think that all of these top-end champs are going to bully her early. You know, maybe she has an okay matchup against Janna, but, like, the other 4 should really smash her in lane. And if she ends up eating a lot of poke, which she will against Caitlyn, against Sivir, all of these champs that are going to be rushing against Jhin, they're going to be, I think, potentially rushing something like a rapid fire cannon or a static shiv. At the very least, they're going to be getting a Kerchai Shard early for the harassment. You know, I think the meta is going to be very early game, push, poke under tower, get those plates, get priority on dragon, and she's just not going to be as good at that. So you can play Lulu if you like her, but I personally, in many years, when I've been very successful on a lot of enchanters, this last season, in the back half especially, a little bit less so. Had a strong front half, weaker back half, but, you know, I've been pretty good on enchanters relative to other champions in past seasons, and Lulu has almost always been one of my weakest enchanters, and it's hard to put your finger exactly on why, but I think that's it right there. It's just tougher laning phase matchup against other enchanters and much weaker scaling. You know, her W does scale really well with the on-hit champs, with the Gensus, but the problem is you have to choose. Do you want to buff that attack speed up, or do you want to be able to have CC and polymorph someone? You can't have both. So I think what they could do to help Lulu out a ton would be to put the attack speed buff on the help picks, and then to just give Whimsy just the movement speed or the polymorph. I think that would be way, way better. And I don't think that would make her OP. She would still have problems with scaling, but that would just solidify her as, okay, she's the on-hit attack speed person with help picks, and she still has a decent piece of CC, a pretty good piece of single target CC. And she's just the single target protection champ. She's got Wild Growth, she's got Whimsy. So yes, that doesn't scale as much as other champs, but by God, she's got the single target buff with help picks, and she's got the single target sort of CC and protection with Whimsy and Growth. So I think that would help out a lot with Lulu, but otherwise, you know, I just don't see her being super strong in the meta, despite the fact that enchanters are good. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, you could put her up higher than Nautilus. I think she would be better than Nautilus in a lot of situations, but the reason that I have her lower is just because all of these, like, anytime I would want to pick Lulu, I would almost always pick one of these 5 first, whereas Nautilus is kind of unique. If you have to have a tank, if you have to have the hard engage, you know, I still might pick Nautilus, but I just can't really see a scenario where I would play Lulu, probably. I mean, maybe if I'm wrong, maybe if, like, Kog'Maw comes, like, roaring back because tanks are back, and just, like, Gensu's Kog'Maw is just the strongest thing to be doing, and you want to put Lulu with him, you know, maybe I'm wrong about that. You know, maybe with Kog'Maw, maybe with Twitch, but it would be very situational. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much. I know this is a longer one, but hopefully people don't mind having longer ones. It is the preseason. There are a ton of changes. So anyways, let me know what you think. Stop by the stream sometime around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'd love to have you. It's a really fun, very chill community. You know, let us know any, like, really cool builds that you have or ideas that you have. Or if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I try to be as interactive as possible. So stop by, check out the rest of the content also that I'm going to be releasing over the next couple of days. And I'll see you next time. Have a great day.